Every religion has an apocalypse. Every civilization that has ever looked up at the sky and asked why we're here has eventually asked the darker question underneath it. What happens when it ends? In the Star Wars galaxy, the Force is everything. It binds the galaxy together. It flows through every living thing. It guides the Jedi, corrupts the Sith, whispers to the sensitive, and hums beneath the feet of those who cannot hear it. It is older than the Republic, older than the Sith, older than any civilization that has ever risen or fallen in a galaxy far, far away. But here is the question that the Jedi Council never debated in an open session. The question that Sith philosophers wrote about in holocrons that were never meant to be found. Can the Force die? And if it can, if something or someone or some catastrophic chain of events were to silence the Force entirely, what happens to the galaxy? Today we're going all the way to the edge of Star Wars cosmology, past the films, past the shows, into the deepest, darkest corner of legend lore, where the answers are waiting, and they're more terrifying than you expect. Before we can talk about the Force dying, we have to understand what it actually is, because the answer is more complicated than most fans realise. The surface level answer is what Obi-Wan tells Luke in a farmer's hut on Tatooine, an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together, beautiful, simple, and comforting. But that is a children's explanation. The deeper lore, pulled from novels, comics, ancient Jedi texts, referenced across both legends and canon, reveals something far more complex. The Force is not simply created by living things. It is not a byproduct of life, the way heat is a byproduct of fire. The relationship runs both ways. The Force needs life, and life at some fundamental level needs the Force. In canon, the Jedi speak of the Force having a will, a direction, a purpose. It is not a mindless energy. It nudges, it guides, it creates conditions for certain outcomes. The very existence of the Chosen One prophecy implies that the Force has some intention. In legends, this goes even further. Ancient Jedi philosophers describe the Force as having two distinct layers: the living Force, which flows through individual organisms, moment to moment, and the cosmic Force, which is vast, eternal current that connects everything across time and space. The living Force feeds the cosmic Force shapes the conditions of life, a cycle, an ecosystem. One cannot exist without the other, which means, theoretically, if you broke that cycle at either end, the entire system could collapse. The Force dying entirely has never happened, but there is extensive lore in both legends and canon about the Force being wounded, damaged, and scars in ways that persist across centuries. These are called Force wounds, or Force vergences of darkness, placing events so catastrophically saturated with death and dark side energy that they tear holes in the Force itself. Malachor is the most famous example. During the Mandalorian Wars, a super weapon called the Mass Shadow Generator was activated above Malachor 5. It crushed the entire planet, ships, soldiers, everything, in a single instant. Thousands of Force-sensitive beings died simultaneously in an explosion of dark side energy, so concentrated that Malachor became a wound in the Force. Centuries later, Jedi who approached it felt physically ill and incapacitated. The ground itself was petrified. Every living thing turned to stone in the moment of death, perfectly preserved, a monument to a single instant of a mass annihilation. Nephema is worse. The Sith Emperor Vitiate, arguably the most powerful dark-side user in galactic history, performed a ritual on Nephema that consumed the entire planet. Not just the people, not just the animals, every living thing. Every blade of grass, every microbe in the soil, every midichlorian on the planet's surface was devoured simultaneously in a dark-side ritual of unimaginable scale. What was left was not a dead planet. Dead planets still exist in the Force, faintly. The way an old fire exists as cold ash. Nephema was something else. It was absent from the Force entirely. Approaching it, Force-sensitive beings describe it as losing their connection completely, not weakened, not distorted, simply gone, like going suddenly deaf in both ears. The Force had been eaten there, not killed, but consumed, locally, and completely. If Nephema represents what one Sith Lord can do to one planet, what would it take to do that to a galaxy? There are three entities in Star Wars lore that came the closest genuinely threatening the Force at a cosmic level. Not a planet, not a solar system, the Force itself. Darth Nihilus was the first glimpse of what a Force wound could become when it gained consciousness. Created by the mass shadow generator at Malachor, Nihilus was not simply a dark side user, he was a wound in the Force that had learned to walk. He consumed Force-sensitive beings to sustain himself, entire planets worth of them. Qatar, an entire Maraluka colony, drained in a single breath. The terrifying implication of Nihilus is this: he was accelerating. Each consumption made him larger, hungrier, more powerful. Jedi philosophers who studied his nature after his death concluded that, left unchecked, Nihilus would have eventually consumed every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy, which would have collapsed the living Force entirely. A galaxy of dead Force users, the living Force extinguished, and with nothing to feed the cosmic Force, what then? The Yuuzhan Vong attacked the Force from a completely different angle. They were a species from outside the galaxy, and they existed independently of the Force. Not dark side, not light side, simply absent. They could not be sent through the Force. Force powers did not work on them rarely. They were a blind spot in the galaxy's nervous system. What made them an existential threat to the Force was not their military power, though they killed trillions, it was their philosophy. The Vong believed in reshaping the galaxy in their image, replacing technology with organic constructs, terraforming worlds into Vong ecosystems. The worlds they conquered became hostile to the Force. They were in essence doing to entire planets what Vitiate had done to Nephema, one world at a time. If they had reshaped the entire galaxy into a Vong ecosystem, the Force would have had nothing left to flow through. Abeloth is the most terrifying of the three. She exists beyond the Force, outside the normal cosmic framework entirely. Ancient beyond measure, she's described in legends as being of pure chaotic Force energy, neither light nor dark, simply wrong. Even the ones of Mortis, the father, the son, the daughter, beings who embodied the Force, from all aspects, imprisoned Abeloth simply because she could not be destroyed. When she escaped, both the Jedi and Sith had to fight her together, because Abeloth did not simply threaten people, she threatened the structure of the Force itself. Her presence unravelled Force connections, caused Force sensitives to go mad, distorted the cosmic currents in ways that even the most ancient Jedi texts had no framework to describe. What does the galaxy look like? First, the immediate deaths. Every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy would die instantly, not from violence, from the severance itself. The Force is not merely a tool Jedi use, but a deeply sensitive Jedi Masters to Sith Lords, beings whose entire biology is saturated with midichlorian connection. Losing the Force would be like losing oxygen. The body would not know how to continue. Secondly, we would have ecological collapse. The Force flows through all living things, not just Force users. Plants, animals, microbes, all carry midichlorians at some level. The Force is part of the biosphere of every living world. Its absence will be felt in ways science in that galaxy could not immediately explain. Crops failing, ecosystems destabilizing, the subtle guidance that shapes evolutionary biology suddenly gone in an instant. Third, the loss of death itself becomes meaningful. In the Star Wars cosmology, what happens when beings die is connected to the Force directly. The cosmic Force absorbs the consciousness of the dead. Force ghosts are an expression of this. Without the Force, death becomes simply nothing. No transition, no cosmic continuation, just cessation. The universe becomes colder, more mechanical place overnight. Fourth, and most philosophically devastating, is the loss of meaning. The Force in Star Wars is the answer to the question of why things happen. Why was Anakin born? The Force. why did Luke succeed? The Force. Without it, the galaxy is not simply weaker, it is random. Events without purpose, lives without cosmic significance, a galaxy that was always told it mattered, suddenly finding out that perhaps it never did. Can the Force be restored? I think the answer, according to the deepest lore, is potentially. The Force has been wounded and healed before. Malakor's wound persisted for centuries, but it did not spread. Nefema remained dead, but the rest of the galaxy continued. The Force, it seems, has resilience, an immune system of sorts. The Wands of Mortis exist specifically to maintain a balance of the Force at a cosmic level. As long as the balance exists, as long as light and dark side exist in tension, rather than one consuming the other entirely, the Force sustains itself. This is the real meaning of the Chosen One prophecy, which was misunderstood by the Jedi. Not simply that Anakin would destroy the Sith, but that he would restore the balance, the dynamic equilibrium that keeps the Force alive. A Force entirely of light would be as dead as a Force entirely of darkness. It requires both. The tension between them is what generates the energy that keeps and sustains everything. Which means the greatest threat to the Force is not the Sith winning or the Jedi winning, it's either side winning completely and indefinitely. The Force does not need peace, it needs balance. And as long as balance exists, somewhere, in someone, in the tension between a galaxy's worth of choices made every single moment, the Force will endure. The Force cannot die easily. It has survived wounds that should have been fatal. It has survived beings that tried to consume it. It has survived thousands of years of the Sith hiding in the shadows and chipping away at it from within. But it is not invincible, and the lore makes clear that the margin between a living Force and a dead one is thinner than the Jedi have ever admitted or want to believe. That is perhaps the most honest thing Star Wars has ever said about faith, about the things we believe hold the universe together. They can be lost, and they require tending, and the responsibility for keeping them alive falls on every generation that inherits them. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Could Nihilus have actually have killed the Force if he'd been left unchecked? And maybe could Abeloth had? Subscribe for weekly deep dives into lore to know which nobody else covers. And may the Force be with you always.